Alors, tonight I changed the page numbers just a little bit. I'm rearranging a little tiny bit how we're going to do these last couple weeks. So tonight we're just doing 8A, and we're also going to look at an example dictionary demo and an example composition inspiration demo. I didn't come up with titles for these yet, so that's off the top of my head. Pretty good titles, yeah. And we're also going to do a lot of review because as of next week, we'll be starting a new tense that is pretty straightforward, actually, formation-wise, but use-wise it can be tricky. So I want everybody to be ready to jump in on the formation of that tense as soon as we get to it. And the way we're going to do that is by reviewing our present tense of various kinds of verbs and various irregulars really quickly tonight so that you can gauge what things you need to go and review. Because the tense that we do next week, imparfait, is almost always based on the first person plural form in present of any verb. Okay? So that's the new form. And that means you need to know your new form really, really, really well. And I have a feeling from the compos and tests that people haven't really had time or something to go back and look at some of these older verbs. So tonight we're going to do that together, and I'll give you a list of the leçons that you need to review as we go through. I don't think we'll get through everything, but at least we're going to do the irregular verbs, and I'll give you the list. And then you'll need to gauge for yourself what things you need to go back and review. And it's a good idea to go back and look at those forms anyway, because you need them all the time, and you need to be able to understand them when you read them. So, anyway, we'll have time for that tonight. So, sans tarder plus, on va regarder le vocabulaire. Oh, j'ai changé la page parce que je cherchais quelque chose. Non, quickly, il faut que tu te pousses, hein. Voilà, tu te mets là-bas. Hein. Voilà, on est à la page 309. Hein. Ou je veux dire 310, hein, parce que quand même. Voilà. Alors, on va commencer à parler de la maison. Et moi, je vais faire zoomer un tout petit peu. Un tout petit peu. On va voir. Et en fait, there aren't that many cognates for house things. So it's kind of weird. Now, some of this vocab you may have already seen at some point, and that's wonderful. There are a couple of false cognates, so be careful about those. And the best you can do is just to go through the list as best you can before you dig in on your websam to kind of familiarize yourself a little. You don't need to get to a point where you've got them all memorized. Get to a point where you feel pretty comfortable seeing each word and seeing what it means and that kind of thing. And then when you dig into websam, that's going to help you clinch it. Okay? So, from talking with a few of you, I think some of you think of studying for the tests as totally separate activity from websam, and in fact websam should be helping you get ready for tests and quizzes and everything. So it really does help to actually work with the language rather than sitting and just drilling yourself on whatever words happen to be on the page, or drilling verb forms or whatever, reading them over and over, or making yourself flashcards and all that stuff. Now that stuff is good to a point. It's not going to help you use those things in sentences. And that's what websam is going to do. And then what I usually say at this point is that if you finish the websam or want a little break from websam occasionally and want to make some original sentences with any of our structures or vocabulaire, then that will really help you clinch it. Okay? So, and if you think about it, when you're little and you're learning new words, you don't sit and drill. You just hear them used a few times, and then you try them out yourself a few times, and pretty soon that one's rooted in your head. So the same thing will work with French. I know it's just hard to think of it that way, and it's hard not to be stressed about it and think, oh my gosh, I have to do this express, I'm thinking in French, exprès, studying that's specifically for that, and, drill and da 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 da. But that really isn't going to help you as much as you think it will. It'll help you psychologically because you'll feel like you did a lot, but it really isn't helping your French very much. So look at them over a little bit at the beginning, jump into an activity. If you need to look them over a little bit more after that activity, do that. Then jump into another activity, and so on and so forth. So, voila. I know that the temptation to sit with flashcards or just sit and drill or whatever is great, but try to think about creating and working with the language rather than just sitting and looking at it or reading it in lists anyway. Voila. So as I said, there aren't too many. In fact, there are almost no cognates. There are some things that are going to make sense for what they mean. Une cuisine, par exemple. You will probably be able to remember that because pretty much everybody knows the word cuisine, and you think of where is cuisine made, where is food made? In a kitchen, right? And there are a couple of others like that that you might be able to link to your own experience that way. And then, as I said, there are a few false cognates, and there are a couple of things that I wanted to... Jardin. Jardin here, a garden or a yard. This is really a yard. D'accord? It's really a yard. Or it can be a flower garden, but it's not a garden for growing potatoes, etc. D'accord? So French people, by and large, think of their yard as a jardin. Anybody who's a bit of an Anglophile and watches British mysteries or reads Agatha Christie or whatever, you know that Brits refer to their yards as gardens, right? So French people do the same thing. Generally, when they say jardin, it can mean a flower garden or flower bed, but it normally means the whole yard. It doesn't mean a garden for growing things. And if you want to know what that is, c'est un potager. Attendez, que mes stickies se réveillent. Oh, il y a beaucoup de stickies hein, de la semaine dernière. Alors, voilà. Et voilà. Très bien. Alors, ce que j'allais dire, c'est que ce que vous dites pour l'endroit où vous faites, vous élevez des légumes, etc., c'est un potager. D'accord? So this would be a vegetable garden. Garden like we would really think of it if you live on a farm or you live, if you guys plant a garden every year, if you and your family, it's a potager. C'est un potager. Tandis que jardin is really a yard. And if you have a little more context so that you know the person's talking about a flower garden, then that's obviously a flower garden. Alors voilà. Très bien. One really big... Oh, wait. Oh, we don't have to talk about that. Okay, good. C'est très bien. Alors, je pensais que c'était dans cette liste, mais non. Voilà. And there aren't too many that I was going to talk about any pronunciation or anything like that with either. Note in this picture, what's going on with this picture? Does anything look different or funny to you? Look at these two rooms in the top left of the photo, of the image. So we have les toilettes, le WC, et la salle de bain. What's going on that wouldn't be happening in an American house? Or at least... Ils sont séparés, n'est-ce pas? Alors, dans la plupart des maisons françaises, on a les toilettes qui sont séparées, la salle de bain. This is something that's starting to go away a little bit. I've seen some apartments where everything's in the same room. I've seen some newer houses where everything's in the same room. But most of the time, the toilet is in a different room than the bathroom. And I don't know about now, but way back when people would find out that in our houses everything was together, they were a little disgusted. Like, oh my gosh, you go to the bathroom in the same room where you clean yourself. That's so crazy. So, that's kind of the thing is, you know, the toilette is the toilette, and then you go clean yourself in the other one. Now, normally they will have a little lavabo, a little sink in the toilette. D'accord? Sometimes it's an actual little extra sink, and it really will be little. It'll be kind of like, I don't know, about the size of an old drinking fountain or something. You know, those old porcelain drinking fountains. You guys probably aren't old enough to know what those are, but a very small sink. Or a lot of people have this little thing that um, is on the top of their toilet tank, and water from the clean part of the tank comes up for you to wash your hands in, and then it goes back down to be basically kind of like brown water or gray water, except you've only washed your hands in it. That goes ahead and goes into the toilet then. So, or I suppose actually it probably drains on down into the septic tank or wherever that stuff goes. Anyway, really pay attention to this. This is very, 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 very typical and very traditional. But as I said, in a lot of apartments, this is starting to kind of be passé. And in some newer houses, they might have everything in one room, but what they'll do is they'll have the toilet behind a little glass wall or something so that it's still separated, but it is all in one room. So, I don't know, I got used to that, and it's pretty cool after you get used to it that, you know, that everything's separated. So anyway, ça c'est l'autre chose que j'allais mentionner. Je pense pas qu'il y ait d'autres choses que j'allais mentionner. Non, je pense pas. Bon, alors on va continuer. Oh, attendez, attendez, attendez. Ce qu'on va faire, c'est de regarder. Oh non, c'est pas ça que je voulais faire. Oh là là, Suzanne. Suzanne. Voilà. Ce qu'on va faire, c'est le... comment ça s'appelle déjà Ah, le chasser l'intrus. J'allais dire cache-cache. C'est pas la même chose. Alors, chasser l'intrus, exercice 1. Vous allez indiquer le mot ou l'expression qui ne va pas avec les autres. Which one of these is not like the other? C'est bon, hein? Vous avez la chance que je chante pour vous ce soir. On attend que ça s'ouvre. I don't know the rest of that song. It's very sad. Pourquoi ça? Ok. J'allais commencer à respecter, hein, mais voilà. Ça c'est enfin ouvert. Alors, indiquer le mot et l'expression, comme j'ai dit avant, qui ne va pas avec les autres. D'accord? I don't know why they translate this again when we've done this a million times, but that's okay. I think you guys are smarter than that. I think you should know what this means by now. Mais voilà. Numéro 1 alors. Un appartement, un quartier, un logement, un studio. Un appartement, un quartier, un logement, un studio. Alors, un quartier, n'est-ce pas? Un quartier. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? So even if you don't know what quartier means, you should be able to lump the other three together. They are all lodgings of some sort, abodes of some sort. Un appartement, un logement, un studio. Et puis le quartier, c'est là où vous trouvez votre appartement ou votre studio, je sais pas quoi, n'est-ce pas? So the neighborhood or area of the city where you may live. Numéro 2, une baignoire, une douche, un sous-sol, un lavabo. Une baignoire, une douche, un sous-sol, un lavabo. So again, if you need to, pause before we go ahead because we're going to be going at a pretty quick clip tonight. Un sous-sol, n'est-ce pas? Un sous-sol. Très bien. Numéro 3, un salon, une salle à manger, une salle de séjour, un jardin. Oh, vous comprenez pourquoi avec numéro 2? Une baignoire, une douche, un lavabo, ce sont toutes des choses que vous trouvez dans la salle de bain, n'est-ce pas? Tandis que le sous-sol, c'est encore une partie de la maison, n'est-ce pas? Sous-sol is the basement, right? So that's a whole other part of the house. Oui? Très bien. Numéro 3, alors, un salon, une salle à manger, une salle de séjour, un jardin. Alors, c'est le jardin. We've talked about jardin just a few minutes ago, so this one should be pretty easy. Un salon, une salle à manger, une salle de séjour, ce sont toutes des salles, n'est-ce pas? Dans la maison, des parties de la maison, quoi. Numéro 4, un meuble, un canapé, une armoire, une affiche. Un meuble, un canapé, une armoire, une affiche. Une affiche, n'est-ce pas? Alors, toutes ces choses-là, ce sont des meubles, d'accord? So, meuble, the generic term, just a piece of furniture of some sort. Canapé, couch, une armoire, wardrobe, n'est-ce pas? Et puis une affiche, c'est quelque chose qui va sur le mur, n'est-ce pas? C'est la décoration plutôt, n'est-ce pas? Tandis que les autres, ce sont tous des meubles. Numéro 5. Un placard, un balcon, un jardin, un garage. Un placard, un balcon, un jardin, un garage. Le placard, n'est-ce pas? So, closet, oui, versus parts of the house again. C'est intéressant parce que ce sont tous des parties de la maison qui sont plus ou moins dehors, n'est-ce pas? Dehors de la maison. Alors, très bien. Numéro 6, une chambre, une cuisine, un rideau, une pièce. Une chambre, une cuisine, un rideau, une pièce. Alors, un rideau, n'est-ce pas? Un rideau, c'est encore de la décoration. C'est aussi pratique parce que tu bloques le soleil ou quoi que ce soit. Et aussi, tu bloques les yeux des autres pour avoir de la sécurité, oui. Et les autres, ce sont, encore une fois, des parties de la maison, des salles, des chambres, n'est-ce pas? Ou je dis des pièces, d'accord? Actually, I did want to talk about salle versus pièce. Pièce is basically any room, okay? So if you're buying a house, they're going to say 4 pièces or 5 pièces, ou je sais pas quoi. And that counts everything except for the bathroom and the kitchen. So they're counting bedrooms and den or whatever, living room or whatever, all those as pièces. Sorry, I have something in my throat. That's better. And salle is generally, it is a room, but it's normally going to be less generic. So pièce I can use for any room whatsoever. And even if I were talking about la cuisine or something, I could say, oh, c'est une pièce, c'est une jolie pièce, je sais pas quoi. But salle is going to be more specific. It's going to be salle à manger, salle de séjour, etc. Et c'est plus spécifique. Hein. Numéro 7. Un meuble, une commode, un couloir, un lit. Un meuble, une commode, un couloir, un lit. Alors, un couloir, n'est-ce pas? Couloir, c'est la partie de la maison d'où s'ouvrent toutes les chambres, etc. normalement, n'est-ce pas? Tandis qu'un meuble, une commode, un lit, ce sont tous des meubles. And again, they're using this generic word for one of them, so we have no idea what kind of furniture this is. But a commode and a lit are both furniture too. Now this one is potentially, une commode, is potentially a big false cognate for us in the Southeast because a lot of people say commode for toilet, right? I honestly have no idea where this came from. I've been meaning to Google it and keep forgetting. So if anybody wants to Google it, you may. I started wondering if it had something to do with the Middle Ages or something when they first started having indoor toilets. Now, basically, they were indoors, but everything that trying to figure out how to say this delicately. Everything that was going into the toilet, let's say, was normally just falling on the ground somewhere. So they would have a room somewhere up high where there would be a few little seats with holes, and people would do their business, and then as they did it, it would just all fall on the ground somewhere. So, I don't know. I started wondering if it had something to do with that, because those things normally look like a piece of furniture, but it still doesn't have anything to do with a commode. A commode for us is like en français, c'est, is a dresser or a chest of drawers, d'accord? So don't think commode, think dresser, etc. Big false cognate, right? And I shouldn't say just in the southeast. My dad was from southern Ohio, and he said commode also. So there are a lot of regions probably that use it. Numéro 8. Un miroir, un tapis, une fenêtre, une affiche. Un miroir, un tapis, une fenêtre, une affiche. Le tapis, n'est-ce pas? Les autres, ce sont tous des choses qui vont aller sur le mur. Hein? Les fenêtres, les affiches, les miroirs. Tandis qu'un tapis. Now, somebody in another class a couple semesters ago said fenêtre because it would be permanent, whereas the other things wouldn't. So if that's your thinking, that's fantastic. Don't worry about it. And anything like that that comes up on WebSam, you guys know by now, just shoot me an email, or in your second attempt, you know to predict what WebSam wants, and you can change your answer. But if you knew your answer was logical, don't worry about it. Go ahead and assume that you were fine, and then give them the answer they want, and you're fine. Alors, un tapis, n'est-ce pas? Très bien. Voilà. Bon. Oui. Alors, so what we were going to do also is look at a couple of things that I hope will help you with compositions. And these are things that normally I do earlier in the semester, but obviously they did not get done with our crazy, scary semester. So basically, the first thing is I want to just kind of talk about using the dictionary a little bit. So on, where did I put, où est-ce que j'ai mis word reference? Oh, attendez, voilà. You are welcome to use dictionaries for your compositions. The problem with dictionaries is that they normally get you into more trouble than they help you. Okay? So preferably, you should stick to the vocab list in the book, and possibly the glossary or the index or whatever at the back of the book, where you can look up all kinds of vocab words. But at least it's, it's a reasonable list, rather than just opening yourself up to every French word in the entire universe. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But if you really, 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 really need to look up a word in a dictionary, I suggested wordreference.com because now it will seem a little overwhelming to some of you, but it gives a lot of different examples of various words so that you can zero in on the one form that really is what you wanted to say. D'accord? Also, there's just kind of an art to looking things up. If I have a sentence like, voilà. If I have a sentence like that I want to translate, okay, where it's something like, oh, I would like to see the world. I would like to travel. Okay? You have to stop and ask yourself, what is the main verb of this sentence? Now, we haven't done conditional yet, technically. Some of you have probably seen it. But basically what this would is doing is changing the tense of like. D'accord? So in French, this is one word. So you can't look up would. D'accord? By the same token, when we were looking at passé composé and I said something like je mange means I ate, and I did eat, and I have eaten. D'accord? It means all three of these. So when you want to translate something like I am having roast beef, or I am having a steak. D'accord? Normally we'd take prendre for an idea like this, but I'm not going to translate être. I'm just going to translate the main idea, which is having a steak. Prendre un steak, ou manger un steak, ou comme vous voulez. Hein? So be very careful when you're thinking from a specific sentence and trying to translate it word for word. The best thing to do is stop and just look at the overall ideas and brainstorm with all the vocab that you think you might need, all of the verbs that you think you might need, and then go from there. And you can build yourself a little word bank if you want to, using outside dictionaries if you must, but that is a way to control yourselves a little bit rather than being tempted to look at every single thing in here and trying to translate it. Some other things that will happen if you're doing that is you'll be misguided when you're looking for certain words that you won't necessarily be able to find the equivalent for. Because when you look back at your sentence, it really is a word that you didn't need to be translating in the first place. D'accord? So, voilà. My best advice is stick with the book, stick with our vocab, stick with the vocab in the back of the book if you must, but use outside dictionaries sparingly and carefully. Now, what I had on the composition module about using dictionaries, I said that if you have to use a dictionary and you look it up in the English-French, you look up a word in the English-French section of the book, of the dictionary, whether it's an online dictionary or hard copy or whatever, this will still work. Once you find the word that you think you need, go to the other half of the dictionary, to the French-English side, and look up the word you found. That will help you confirm whether it really is the word that you need. Just like in English, we have lots of different ways to say the same thing. So you're going to come up with lots of possibilities, and you can't just grab the first one. The first one is probably just the most common one and isn't necessarily going to be the one that you need. And actually what I meant to do was to pull up a somewhat simpler French dictionary first, because word reference is pretty amazing. So what you don't want to do is use these translators. I know you want to, but you don't want to. Believe me. Generally, they're going to lead you astray at some point. They're too literal. They can't take into account context. They're better and better. They do a better job than they used to, but more often than not, it's going to create problems rather than help you. And you can ask a couple of your colleagues who turned things in which were translated that way, and they got things back that almost didn't have any black text left on it because there were so many problems. Which is part of the reason why as soon as I realize something's been translated, I just stop grading, because it's impossible to grade those things. But if you even just do one sentence here and there and you're translating the whole thing word for word, chances are you're going to miss most of that sentence, meaning-wise and structures and everything, because it's not going to be translated comprehensively if you're using a translator. So anyway, here is le verso. I used to use this one way back when. So if we're looking for something, I had an example earlier. Oh, somebody wanted to say rather earlier in one of the compositions. So I'm going to say rather. Oh, I'm going to switch this. Rather. Alors. Plutôt. Now, you find this word, your tendency is going to be, oh, I'm going to grab it and go. Don't grab it and go. Look at the examples, see how it's being used. D'accord? The person who wanted to use this word wanted to say, I would rather eat such and such than something else. That's not at all the same thing. D'accord? So that's another really good example of where you should look at the main idea of the sentence. If I say something like, I'd rather be hiking, d'accord? What is this really meaning? It's really a verb of preference. So you could actually just say, je préfère, and there's your idea, d'accord? Already translated for you. Il n'y a rien de plus simple. Je préfère faire des randonnées, d'accord? So be very careful. Look at your sentence very carefully. Don't just grab a word and go try to translate it. Really look and see. And the other reason then for looking at these examples is because hopefully 90 or 95% of you will look at these examples and go, oh, that's not at all what I needed, right? And they actually say down here, they get into what you really were aiming for, what this person was aiming for. I'd rather stay in tonight. Oh, préféré. Okay? So be very careful. Look at the examples. And then the other thing I was saying was, if you're working with a simpler dictionary that doesn't give you enough examples, and you're not sure, and you want to say, well, I want to double check. So I'm going to go to plutôt. J'arrive pas à taper ce soir. Alors plutôt, and I'm going to look that up so that I can confirm whether I wanted to say it. So here we go. L'eau est plutôt froide. The water's rather cold. Ah, that's not at all what I wanted to say, right? And none of these examples, in fact, have anything to do with preference. So you can see right there that, oh, I'm totally on the wrong track. Okay? So get to the most simple form of your sentence. Think about the most simple idea in this sentence. And instead of thinking about each individual word. D'accord? So when we look at word reference, and especially there are a few of you who are going on to major or minor, and that's partly why I wanted you to look at word reference, just because as you're writing and getting higher and higher in your French studies, you're really going to want to bookmark this site. It's amazing. So if we look for rather here, probably going to end up with about 500 examples. Usually there's a whole page of examples. That's a pretty big amount of examples. So you can see what I'm talking about. Now, you still could use this site and just not look at all that crazy stuff, because they're going to go on and on and on with all kinds of examples, and they even have forums. I used to do a fair amount of translation, and there are forums on word reference where people would say, hey, has anybody translated this lately? Do you think this is a good match? And you give your suggestion, and somebody says, oh, I would change this to this, and somebody else says, no, I think it's okay the way it is, and blah, blah, blah. So it's pretty interesting. But even if you're just slogging through 1002 and you're done with French after that or whatever, you can still use word reference, because you still are going to have these nice examples right here, right? And they're telling you right away, here's rather to some degree, meaning he was rather disturbed, etc. Here's rather, as in the idea of prefer. Plutôt, d'accord? Alors, plutôt here is a little different. I'm not going to go into it, but there is a way to use that. Oh, well, here they have an example. I'd go into a bar rather than a cinema. Okay, so that's a little bit different use of rather again, right? Otherwise, you're going to go to préférer. Je préférerais aller dans un bar qu'au cinéma. Okay? Alors, voilà. And then again, look in the other half of the dictionary. That's the key thing, especially if you're using kind of a simple dictionary or an older dictionary or smaller dictionary or whatever. You've always got that English-French side, or French-English side to check with. So go look in the French-English side, make sure you've grabbed the right word. D'accord? Another thing that happens a lot if you're using a print dictionary, a hard copy dictionary, is, I can't tell you how many times this has happened. We'll be grading compositions, and there'll just be the wackiest word in the middle of a sentence, and it's just like, oh my gosh, how did this student decide to use this word? It's the weirdest thing ever. You know, nothing about that word has to do with what they're trying to say, and da-da-da-da. And then one of us will stop and go, wait a minute. If we were looking up this other word, that word would be right above it in the dictionary. And the student will have copied the wrong word out of the dictionary by 1 line or 2 lines. That happens all the time. So that's another reason to check on your French-English side so that you grabbed the right word, especially with a hard copy one. That's not very possible, luckily, with an online dictionary. So anyway, that is my little hint / demo for dictionary use. But remember what I first said. First rule is you shouldn't need one. You should stick with what we have to work with in the book, and at the most you could use the dictionary in the back of the book, okay? And let me show you what I'm talking about, because people look at me like, there's no way to use that stuff when I'm trying to write my compo. There's so many things I want to say that aren't in the list, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, I know about that. You're right. But a few of you, and I think in the compo thing too, in the information block I put on there on the composition module, I said something about using the vocabulary and structures in our unit as your inspiration. Okay. Now, this is going to be a little artificial because you won't be able to say necessarily everything you would say if you're just writing in English and saying whatever you wanted, right? But it is a way to force yourself to use the current structures and the current elements, okay? So when you start your composition, maybe it's a composition to describe your house, d'accord? So if you just start off thinking in English, which is also something that leads you astray, and trying to translate as you go, you're invariably going to get away from the current vocab. It's just going to happen. I promise you, it will happen. Sometimes to a larger or smaller degree, but it will happen. So that's not going to help you practice the current stuff that we're playing with, right? So instead, what you would do is, for example, look at this list and go, oh, okay, what kinds of things do I want to say about my house using these tools? So kind of think of it as a toolbox. And somebody said, here, build a doghouse, but you can only use these tools. So what would you do? You would look in the toolbox and see what you had at your disposal. Or somebody said, draw a picture of your house, but you can only use these crayons here. And you would look at the crayons and see, okay, what can I do with these? You wouldn't try to go buy more crayons, right? You wouldn't go try to buy more tools. You would use what you had at your disposal. So think of this stuff as a toolbox or a paint set or whatever, okay? So that you're limiting yourself to, I don't want to use that word because really you have a lot to work with here, but you are sticking to the current vocabulary, the current structures, etc. Okay? So when I look at this list, I might say, oh, well, I live in the dorm, so here I can talk about that. What else can I do? Oh, in the dorm we have a salle à manger, so I can talk about that. And I might make a list as I go where I'm brainstorming about all the things that are in this list that apply to where I live right now. And if, you know, you could do your home, your house, your house, the house you live in. Those of you who aren't in dorms, of course, use your house at home. Those of you who are in dorms, you could use your mom and dad's house or whatever as well, of course. But go through this and let this list inform what you write, okay? And by the same token, look at the grammar and do the same thing, okay? Because what happens a lot of the time is we set up these topics and they're designed to kind of coerce you into using specific grammar, and then a third of the compos come through and people didn't use that grammar at all. And it's because they weren't thinking about how the topic really works, and they weren't really looking at their tools and going from their tools, okay? So this is the best way to make sure that A, you don't get yourself into trouble with crazy vocab that you do not need to know for eons, and you are effectively practicing the stuff that we're playing with currently, okay? So this is a very, very small little demo slash, I guess, demonstration of this, but hopefully you see what I mean. And with the second compo, really try to do this, okay? The second compo will be similar to the first one, where we have a very kind of finite topic. It will point to a very specific set of structures and vocab elements, and use your book to inspire you. Don't just start out of the blue and pretty soon you're using words that, you know, that French people don't even know, or, or something. So, voila. And if you get stuck, or you're just like, I don't understand how she meant to apply this to the new compo, then come to office hours or make an appointment or whatever, and we will look at it together and I'll give you some ideas, okay? We can look at the vocab list and kind of say, well, you know, do you have any of these in your life or whatever? So, voila. That's a little longer than I meant to spend on that, of course, but I think it's really important. And especially for you guys in 1002, you've got a lot more time to use those dictionary skills and use these tips about writing from the book and writing from the vocab list. So you've got, at least most of you do, as you go through 2000, really try to do the same thing. Try to really go from your current elements. Go from your toolbox that's in your book or your paint set that's in your book. Okay? Voila! So, what I was going to tell you was, and I know I always say I'm going to do this and then I forget, but I really will try to remember to post a list of all the lessons that have all of your different kinds of verbs so far, because those are what you need to get busy reviewing this week so that you're ready for imparfait formation next week. So what I was talking about before was voilà. On n'a pas besoin de celui-là. Je veux que celui-là. Voilà, très bien. Alors, I'm just going to show you a teeny bit. So, when you get to imparfait next week, when we get to there, you're going to learn endings that are constant for almost every single verb. There's just a couple of verbs that are a little bit different. And the root is found exactly the same for almost every single verb, except for just a couple. Same thing, okay? So it's a super consistent tense formation-wise. And that's a really big help because it can be pretty tricky figuring out when to use it. So you don't want to be using lots of time figuring out formation of imparfait. You're going to want to be concentrating on when to use it and when not to use it pretty quickly. Okay? So the best way to prep for that, one example is with your, the best example is with regular IRs. So what I told you earlier was that you take your first person plural, which is nous, of any verb, except for être, avoir, etc. And we'll talk about a couple of others. Basically, I'm going to take that out, and I'm taking off my ONS, and I'm adding about the ending, and I'm done. Okay, so basically you take nous minus ONS plus imparfait ending. D'accord? The new form minus the ONS, oh, sorry, plus, plus imparfait endings. D'accord? And it really is. We can very rarely tell you that there are absolutely no exceptions to a certain verb, and there are absolutely no exceptions to this verb except for the 2 or 3 that we're going to give you right at the beginning. Okay? And they're easy to remember because they're always weird. Être being one of them. Être is always wacky, right? So it's going to continue to be wacky for imparfait. So the reason I wanted to do this is to show you that, everybody needs to go back and review present tense of almost all your verbs, almost any irregular that you've learned so far, almost any group of verbs that you've learned so far, so that you're ready to plug any one of these into imparfait. Okay? So this is also really good review, actually, as we get closer to the final, because you'll be looking at things that you will probably need in the compo, right? Even though we're just mostly dealing with the second half of the semester, you know how comprehensive everything is by now. So that snowball of grammar that is rolling towards the final still has some stuff from the first section of the first half of the semester on it, right? Alors, très bien. So the first thing we're going to look at, we're really going to just take time to look at some irregulars, and I'm going to trust you guys to go look at your IRs, REs, and ERs, and your irregular IRs, etc. And I will try very hard to remember to put this list on our module so that you know exactly which lessons. But honestly, you could find them pretty easily if you look at your tableau de matière, your table of contents in your book, okay? But I will give you lists so that you know exactly which ones to go look at. So right now, we are going to look at, en fait, oh, you know what? I forgot. We aren't going to do very many of the irregulars because they're the ones that are irregular. For imparfait, sorry for the joke. So allez is one of our examples of an irregular, and it is formed just like I just said, the rule for forming allez, forming imparfait. So let's go to text, and we're just going to review a little bit with text. Oh, you know what? I was going to look up the essays, but I didn't write down the page numbers. But that's a quick way to go through, is to find each of these lessons on WebSAN, on WebSAN, or in the vText, and just do the essays to see if you remember the formation more or less. And if you do pretty well in the SAE, you're probably okay. You probably can go on to the next group of verbs. So anyway, pour texte, on va chercher. And actually, I've been meaning to show you that text actually has a really fun verb practice thing. And you can normally just Google text verb practice and you'll get it up. But here it is. And this is pretty cool. And again, this is not something that I think you should just do for 3 hours to learn your verbs. But it is something that can be helpful if it comes up. My computer's getting a little overwhelmed. Okay. On va laisser grand, on va laisser grand. So here, look at what's going on here. You have various groups of verbs. You have your regulars. You have irregular groups. D'accord? So any kind of verb, virtually, that you want to practice, you can click it, and then, oh, what tense do I want to practice? So after next week when we're doing imparfait, if you wanted to, you could come over here and say, oh, you know, I just want to kind of quickly practice everything in imparfait real quick. So I'm going to go to ER verbs first. I'm going to hit imparfait, and I'm going to say apply. And this is very rote. It's not interesting, but it's a quick way to just see how well you're remembering this stuff. Okay, and it is a quick way just to quiz yourself for a little while. Again, do not spend hours and hours and hours doing something like this. It's not going to help you clinch it. It's going to help you refresh your memory a little bit so that you can jump into the web sound, or you could jump into other activities using imparfait or whatever. But don't just do these ad nauseum, okay? Just use them for a little while to kind of refresh your memory. So then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, oh, admirer, okay, admirer, and you don't know the endings yet, but I'm going to go ahead and put them in, or at least theoretically, you don't know the endings yet. Oh, problem. Voilà. D'accord? You may notice that the endings are actually the same as conditional. If you remember conditional from other French classes, you guys won't have it until 2001. I'm talking instead of writing. Voila. So you would just quiz yourself, and then let's change one. I don't think there's an I in the ER. I think it just goes O and S. Check. It usually doesn't take this long to check. Voila. Oh my goodness, we got one wrong. Admirion. Très bien. So you see how it works. And again, don't do it like crazy. Just do it for a little while to kind of refresh your memory, wet your whistle, or whatever you want to say. And then you can go on to the next verb, and it'll continue quizzing you for quite some time. Depending on what you're practicing, it has a different number of verbs that it's going to give you. But like this one, if you wanted to go through them all, which is I do not suggest doing that, you would have 95 different frames to go through. So don't do that. Just do that long enough to kind of refresh your memory. Alors, très bien. Alors, aller, we're going to actually use it in sentences. And another good thing, as I always say, would be to go ahead and make some sentences to remind yourself how to use it and to really clinch it back in your head to make some original sentences with aller. But we're just going to look at the formation really quickly. And then I really wanted to do an oral today. So we are going to do that, even though we're not getting far with our review. Voilà, so aller, we're just doing present tense, je bob, and everybody should know these, but I understand if you have to stop and think about them a little bit. You need to pause the video because we're going to go pretty quickly. Je bob, va, au parc. Oh, you know what? I keep forgetting to check and see if anybody comes. Nobody ever comes in your class, so I'm probably safe. I forgot. Normally I have this stuff over to the edge so I can make sure. Excuse me, so I can make sure. Je bob et Cory, nous. My computer's getting really upset with me. Both of my computers are kind of moody. It's very interesting. It's been particularly special putting the videos up on YouTube lately because both of my computers kind of keep going on strike a little bit and just kind of going, oh, okay, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, wait a minute. Only half of it is uploaded. Ah! Je bob et Cory, nous n'allons pas en classe aujourd'hui. Je bob, dit au professeur, comment allez-vous? Oh, pardon. Oh, pardon. Comment allez-vous? Taxi Tammy, est-ce que vous allez au restaurant ce soir? Moi, j'aimerais bien aller au restaurant, moi. Oh, j'adore aller au restaurant. Rita, est-ce que tu vas souvent à Walmart en Corée? Pourquoi est-ce que tu ne vas pas en classe? Eh oh, j'ai tapé. Okay. Quand Tammy chante, Bette ne va pas bien. Vous comprenez? Quand Tammy chante, Bette ne va pas bien. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire ne pas aller bien? C'est-à-dire de se sentir mal, hein, n'est-ce pas? Alors peut-être qu'elle a mal aux oreilles ou elle a mal à l'estomac ou je sais pas quoi quand il y a la Tammy qui chante, n'est-ce pas? Alors voilà. Tex et Edouard vont souvent au café Quackenbush's. So don't forget, this is all taking place in College Station at UT, so they'll have specific things from that town very often. On va au cinéma ce soir? Bob, salut Tammy, comment vas-tu? Etc. D'accord? So, do that with all of them. You don't necessarily have to go through the whole activity. If you do 4 or 5 and you think, oh, I'm pretty much remembering these, cool. You know, trust yourself, trust your instincts. If you didn't have to, scratch your brain too much to get any of these out, then probably you are fine with it and move on to the next one. So it's mostly to kind of check how you're doing with them. Pay special attention with with the third person. Oh, I can talk. With the first person plural, with the new form, right? So that you're ready for next week. And mostly, just look at the whole form, refresh your memory, really think about what it means as you go through whatever you work on with it. So if you're in WebSam instead of text or whatever, same thing. Just really think about what it means as you go. And you should be in good shape. D'accord? So let's look at this oral section. If you would like to practice this, we haven't had time to do one of these for a little while, but it's the écouter à la page 311, d'accord? So if you need to, pull it up on the vText or pull it up in WebSam or whatever. And this will be just the last few minutes of our, I think it's easier to look at in the book. And you have another, oh, qu'est-ce que j'ai fait? Oh, Suzanne. Comment ça se fait que j'ai fermé ça? Je voulais pas que ça ferme. Je sais pas pourquoi ça s'est fermé. Oh. Bon ben. Retexte. Ah, le voilà. Ok. Alors, pour moi, c'est un peu plus clair ici, hein, mais bon. Patrice. Oh. Il est là quand même, non? Ça rouvre. Je veux pas que ça rouvre. Je veux que ça reste ouvert de dernière fois. Bon ben, 309, c'est ça? 311. Voilà. Alors, à la page 311, vous allez regarder l'exercice, and just like on the tests and quizzes and everything, anytime you're doing something oral, or a reading for that matter, if you're doing some kind of reading comprehension, read through your cues first. Read through the questions. And of course, the little consigne, the little directions area, right? But especially the questions, because the questions are really going to give you almost a little outline of what you're about to read or listen to, right? And so your head is really ready with the context. You see all of this stuff about the appartement. I'm already getting an idea of what she's going to talk about, right? Or, voilà, c'est Patrice qui parle, so it's a guy. Voilà. So let me find the page where my little script is, because it's easier to find in here. En principe, normalement, quoi. Et ben voilà. So I'm just going to go through it once, and then you can replay it as many times as you need to. And if you want to listen to the WebSem one also to kind of get a low contrast, a couple of different accents to listen to, cool. Don't forget, I'm probably going to be doing the orals on the final. So this is also another way for you to keep getting used to mon accent à moi, mes intonations et tout ça. Bon, so Patrice cherche un appartement, écoutez sa conversation téléphonique et dites si les affirmations sont vraies ou fausses. Okay? I think on this one you might get everything in the same order as what you have it here, but I'm not totally positive, so just do the best you can. Patrice is looking for an apartment. Listen to his telephone conversation, and then decide whether these statements are true or false. Okay? So don't laugh and read voices again. Voilà. Patrice. Allô, Madame Dautry, s'il vous plaît. Madame. Oui, c'est moi, j'écoute. Mon nom est Patrice Lecomte. Je vous appelle au sujet de votre appartement du 24 rue Pasteur. Est-ce qu'il est toujours libre? Oui, jeune homme, il est toujours libre. Parfait. Comment est-il? Il est au 4e étage d'un immeuble moderne. Il y a un balcon, mais pas de garage. La chambre est plutôt petite, mais il y a beaucoup de placards. Et la salle de bain? Elle est petite aussi, avec une douche, un lavabo et un grand miroir. Les toilettes sont séparées. Et le salon? C'est la pièce principale. Elle est plutôt grande. La cuisine est juste à côté. C'est combien le loyer? Le loyer est de 490 euros. Oh, c'est cher. Mais vous êtes à côté de l'université et l'appartement est libre le 1er septembre. Bon, je vais y penser. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir, madame. Au revoir, monsieur. Fin. D'accord? So I went at a pretty good clip. Don't forget, you can listen to it a whole bunch of times, right? So do the best you can. If you have questions about it, then be sure and grab me. And je pense que c'est tout pour cette fois. Je vais vous mettre votre petite liste de leçons pour les révisions verbales. Je peux dire les révisions de tous vos verbes sur le module. Et puis, voilà. So, spend as much time as you can aside from WebSam, because you just have the vocab stuff, and I'm going to put some of the video stuff up for the WebSam this time. So, use as much time as you can to review all of those different kinds of verbs. At least take a look at them and decide whether you need to review that particular kind or not, or that particular verb or not, etc. D'accord? Voilà. Alors, faites-moi savoir si vous avez des questions quelconques sur la compo, sur le midterm, etc. Je vais finir avec le midterm ce soir. Il y avait 2 ou 3 gens qui avaient des questions, des points quelconques. Alors, il y a des changements qui me restent un peu. Mais tous les autres sont déjà postés. Et je finirai dans 1 heure ou 2 après mon deuxième cours. D'accord? Voilà. Alors, bonne soirée. Merci. Au revoir. J'ai fermé tous les trucs, je veux dire. En fait, je devrais pas fermer ça, mais c'est pas grave. So, comme déjà, of it.